The night was quiet, almost too quiet for the small coastal town of Seabridge. The waves lapped gently against the shore, and a soft wind rustled through the trees. Most of the town's people were asleep, tucked safely in their homes, unaware that their peaceful world was about to change forever. Only Ethan, a young man of 23, was awake. He often wandered the beach at night, thinking about life, dreaming about adventures beyond the horizon, and feeling like something extraordinary was waiting for him. That night he noticed something strange. A flicker of light, brighter than a star but moving too quickly to be one, streaked across the sky and plunged toward the sea. The water glowed for a brief moment, then disappeared. Ethan's curiosity overcame his fear. Without thinking twice, he grabbed a flashlight and ran down to the beach. The sand was cold beneath his feet, and the salty breeze whipped his hair around his face. As he approached the spot where the light had vanished, he noticed a faint smoke rising from the edge of the water. Something had crashed. His heart raced. Boats in the harbor had been empty, and the beach was deserted. Yet here was proof that something extraordinary had just happened. Carefully, Ethan stepped closer. Amid the sand and scattered debris, he saw it. A strange, metallic object partially buried in the wet sand. It was shaped unlike anything he had ever seen, with smooth curves and a faint glow emanating from inside. As he crouched down, he heard a soft, almost human-like whimper coming from within the wreckage. Ethan froze. No one else was around, yet a sound, small and weak, reached his ears. It was desperate and scared. His heart ached, and despite his natural fear of the unknown, he knew he could not walk away. Gently, Ethan moved the debris aside. His eyes widened as he saw a small figure, barely the size of a teenager, lying among the wreckage. Her skin had a subtle shimmer, like the reflection of moonlight on water. Her large eyes were wide with fear, glistening like polished gems. Her hair seemed to float slightly, as if weightless. She wore a delicate outfit, unlike any fabric Ethan had seen before, soft and glowing faintly. It was clear she was hurt. Bruises and cuts marked her small body, and she shivered from both pain and fear. Despite his shock, Ethan's instinct was to help. "Hey, are you okay?" he whispered, unsure if she could understand him. The creature looked at him with wide eyes and a small nod, though her fear did not leave. She spoke no words, only soft musical sounds that Ethan could barely hear. It was almost like a song, gentle but trembling. He realized she was trying. Ethan carefully lifted the small creature from the wreckage. Her body was fragile, and he could feel the warmth of her fear. He carried her to his small home, a cozy house at the edge of town, hidden by trees and cliffs. Once inside, he gently placed her on a soft blanket. She stayed very still, watching him with large, glimmering eyes that seemed to hold both curiosity and worry. Ethan didn't know where to start. He had no idea how to heal her, or even what kind of being she was. Over the next few hours, Ethan cleaned her wounds as best he could with bandages and water. She made soft sounds, almost like humming, and sometimes reached out a tiny hand toward him. At first, he thought it was fear, but gradually he realized she was trying to trust him. Every small gesture from her felt like a fragile bridge forming between them. Ethan felt a strange connection, as if he had known her forever, even though he had just met her. It was then he noticed her eyes more clearly. They weren't entirely human. They were larger than human eyes and had colors that seemed to shift in the light, from green to blue to a golden hue, like sunlight on water. The more he looked at her, the more he sensed that she was not from this world. But Ethan didn't feel afraid. Somehow, he knew he had to protect her, no matter the cost. She finally made her first attempt at communication. A gentle pulse of thought entered Ethan's mind, surprising him. A voice, soft but clear, whispered, "Thank you For helping. He jumped slightly, realizing she was speaking telepathically. He quickly nodded. I'm Ethan. I'll keep you safe, he said aloud, though she could hear his thoughts too. She responded with another pulse. Lyra. That was her name. Ethan spent the next day learning more about her. Lyra was a princess from a distant planet called Altheria, a world of advanced beings whose cities floated in the sky and whose people could communicate through thought. She had been forced to flee when her world was attacked by a tyrant who wanted to take control of her planet. Lyra's ship had been destroyed during her escape, leaving her stranded on Earth. As she shared glimpses of her world through mental images, Ethan saw towering crystal cities, forests glowing with light, and rivers that shimmered like liquid silver. He was amazed, but also saddened. Her world was in chaos, and she was alone, far from her people. Despite the wonder, danger was not far behind. Ethan realized that hiding Lyra was not enough. Someone or something was searching for her. He had heard news reports of strange lights near the coast and mysterious figures appearing at night. He suspected that government agents or other humans had started to notice unusual activity. Worse, Lyra sometimes twitched or seemed nervous as if she could sense pursuers. Ethan understood that time was limited. In the following days, Ethan and Lyra grew closer. She learned simple human gestures like smiling and nodding, and he learned to understand her thoughts more clearly. He discovered that she had powers he could not fully comprehend. Lyra could slightly move objects with her mind, and when she touched certain surfaces, she could sense their history, feeling echoes of events that had happened there. Ethan was amazed, but he never treated her like a stranger or a curiosity. He treated her like a friend, someone he would fight for if needed. Lyra, in turn, began to rely on Ethan. She confided in him about the fear she carried, the longing for her family, and the responsibility of being a princess who might never return home. Ethan listened quietly, never judging, always offering comfort. Together, they started making small plans to protect her. Ethan modified a part of his home into a hidden space, a safe room where Lyra could rest without being seen. They also prepared supplies for the possibility of fleeing if danger came closer. One evening, as Ethan and Lyra sat by the window watching the sunset, she shared more of her world. She showed him a vision of her home planet before it was attacked. Children playing in crystal gardens, markets with floating food, and skies filled with flying creatures that looked like birds but shimmered like jewels. Then, the image shifted. He saw smoke rising from the cities, buildings crumbling, and people running in fear. Lyra's soft humming turned into a sound of sadness. Ethan felt a pang of sorrow. He realized that helping Lyra was no longer just about protecting one life. It was about helping a world in desperate need. The bond between them deepened further when Ethan found himself dreaming of her world. In his dreams, he walked beside her through the glowing forests of Altheria, feeling a strange sense of familiarity. He could sense the trust she placed in him, and he understood that he was becoming more than a protector. He was part of her journey. She, in turn, seemed to draw strength from his courage. Each day their trust grew stronger, and with it Ethan's determination to keep her safe. But the town began to stir. Strange lights were seen near the cliffs, and rumors of a fallen star spread quickly. Ethan worried that their secret could not stay hidden for long. Lyra's fears were mirrored in his own. He knew that soon they would have to make difficult decisions. Should they stay and risk being discovered, or flee and try to reach safety elsewhere? He did not have all the answers, but he had one thing. He knew for certain he would never abandon her. One night, as the wind howled outside and the waves crashed harder than usual, Ethan held Lyra close. She had been frightened by the sounds of approaching vehicles on the beach, and her small body trembled. He whispered to her, "You're safe here. I'll protect you." For the first time, Lyra allowed herself to relax completely. She reached out and touched his hand, her energy warm and calming. In that moment, Ethan understood something profound. Sometimes, courage is not just about facing the outside world. It is also about facing the unknown and opening your heart to trust someone completely. By the end of that night, both Ethan and Lyra were changed. Ethan was no longer just a curious young man. He was now a guardian, carrying a responsibility greater than anything he had imagined. Lyra had found someone she could rely on, a human willing to protect her even when the odds were against them. And though the dangers of the outside world were only beginning to close in, the first spark of hope had ignited, a hope that together they could face whatever came next. The days after Lyra's arrival passed quickly, but they were far from peaceful. Ethan knew they could not stay in Seabridge forever. Strange signs appeared around the town, unexplained lights in the sky, unusual figures moving along the cliffs at night, and rumors that the government was investigating the crash. Ethan realized they were being watched, and the danger was closing in. He also noticed that Lyra sometimes stiffened, as if she could sense enemies approaching even before anyone arrived. The thought of losing her terrified him, but he refused to give in to fear. He knew he had to act. One early morning, Ethan awoke to find Lyra standing by the window, her eyes fixed on the horizon. Her small hands were clenched tightly, and her body trembled. "Ethan," she said softly through their telepathic connection, "they are coming closer. We cannot stay." Ethan nodded, his mind racing. They had prepared for this possibility, but now it was real. He quickly packed essential supplies, food, water, blankets, and some basic tools. He also hid her in a small, specially prepared backpack designed so she could stay safe and protected. As they left the house, Ethan moved cautiously, scanning the surroundings. The streets were empty, but the feeling of being watched was heavy. Shadows moved along the edges of his vision, and distant headlights flashed through the trees. Someone was definitely following them. He led Lyra down winding paths toward the dense forest beyond the cliffs. The forest was dark, but Ethan knew it well. He had explored it many times, and he hoped its dense foliage would give them a chance to hide. Once inside the forest, Ethan and Lyra took a moment to rest. Lyra's small body shivered with fatigue, and Ethan held her gently, whispering words of comfort. She closed her eyes, leaning against him, and for a few minutes, the forest was silent except for the sounds of birds and the wind in the trees. Ethan realized that the bond between them had grown stronger with each passing day. He was no longer just her protector, he was her friend, her companion, and someone she trusted completely. Their peace was short-lived. In the distance, they heard the sound of engines, loud and mechanical, cutting through the quiet of the forest. Ethan's heart raced. The pursuers were catching up. He quickly scanned the area and noticed an abandoned cabin nearby. It was old and hidden behind thick trees, but it could provide temporary shelter. With careful steps, he guided Lyra inside. The cabin was dark and dusty, but it offered a hiding place. He closed the door quietly and moved some old furniture to block the windows. Lyra looked up at him, her eyes wide. "Will they find us?" she asked softly. Ethan shook his head. "Not if we stay quiet. We just need to wait until it's safe," he replied, though his voice trembled slightly. Inside, Ethan noticed a few objects that could be useful. Old ropes, tools, and even a broken lantern could be used to set small traps or create distractions if the pursuers came too close. He began preparing quietly, realizing that survival was not just about hiding, it was about being ready for anything. As night fell, the forest grew darker, and strange noises surrounded them. Ethan felt the tension in Lyra's body. She whispered images into his mind, showing flashes of the enemy approaching, a group of figures in dark uniforms, moving quickly and quietly, searching for her. Ethan's pulse quickened. He knew they could not outrun them forever, but he also understood that clever thinking could turn the situation in their favor. He decided to use the forest to their advantage. Branches, loose rocks, and fallen logs could become obstacles. Shadows and moonlight could hide them. Every small detail mattered. Hours passed. Ethan and Lyra stayed hidden, barely breathing, listening to the movements outside. Finally, the pursuers came close, their voices low but urgent. Ethan's heart pounded. He whispered to Lyra, "Stay calm. Follow my lead." Using signals, he guided her to small openings in the cabin walls, allowing them to see without being seen. The pursuers moved carefully, checking every corner, but they did not notice the subtle traps Ethan had set. Ropes that could trip, loose branches that could make noise in the distance, and strategically placed rocks. The enemy was clever, but Ethan's knowledge of the forest gave them an edge. Suddenly, one of the pursuers entered the cabin. Ethan held his breath, his hands gripping Lyra tightly. The man walked slowly, scanning the room, unaware of the hidden space where Lyra crouched. Ethan's mind raced. He needed a distraction. Quietly, he grabbed a small rock and tossed it toward a corner of the cabin. It hit the floor with a soft thud. The pursuer turned, moving toward the sound, and in that moment, Ethan and Lyra slipped out through a back exit he had found earlier. They ran silently into the forest, using every shadow, every tree, and every natural obstacle to stay hidden. Hours later, exhausted but safe for the moment, they reached a small clearing. Ethan looked at Lyra. Her face was pale, but her eyes shone with trust and determination. "We made it this far," he said, smiling despite the fear still in his heart. Lyra reached out and touched his arm, a silent gesture of gratitude and connection. For Ethan, the moment was profound. He realized that protecting her was more than a mission. It was a journey that tested his courage, intelligence, and heart. During their brief rest, Lyra shared more of her abilities. She could sense energy, patterns in the forest, detect movement, and even feel when danger was near. Together, they began planning how to reach a safer place, somewhere far from Seabridge and the enemy forces. Ethan realized that their path would be long and filled with challenges, but he felt a growing confidence. They were not just fleeing, they were moving toward hope, toward safety, and toward a mission that could change everything. As dawn approached, Ethan and Lyra continued their journey. Each step through the forest strengthened their bond. Ethan knew the pursuit would not end soon, and that challenges ahead could test them in ways they could not imagine. But he also knew one thing with certainty. He would face any danger, overcome any obstacle, and protect Lyra at all costs. Together, they had begun a journey that would push them to the limits of courage, trust, and determination, a journey that would change both of their lives forever. Ethan and Lyra had been moving through the forest for days, always careful to avoid open spaces and listen for the smallest sound that might signal danger. The night was their ally, and the dense trees shielded them from prying eyes. Each day, Ethan grew more aware of Lyra's unique abilities. She could sense the patterns of energy in the forest, feel when someone or something approached, and even guide them away from dangerous paths. Together, they navigated rocky cliffs, rushing, streams and tangled undergrowth, slowly leaving the town behind. The journey was exhausting, but it brought them closer than ever. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Lyra stopped suddenly. She raised her hand, and Ethan froze beside her. A faint glow appeared between the trees ahead. "It's a sanctuary," Lyra whispered in his mind. Her voice carried both hope and relief. Ethan looked at her, curious and cautious. "Sanctuary?" he asked. Lyra nodded. Images of an alien world flashed in his mind. A hidden place filled with advanced technology, glowing lights, and protective energy fields. "It is a place where I can rest and heal," she explained. Ethan's heart lifted. Finally, they might find safety, at least for a little while. The sanctuary was hidden in a deep valley surrounded by high cliffs. As they approached, Ethan was amazed. The entrance was covered with vines, moss, and natural formations that disguised it perfectly. Lyra touched the glowing symbols on the walls, and the stone doors slowly opened, revealing a chamber filled with soft, pulsing light. Ethan had never seen anything like it. The walls seemed alive, with patterns that shifted and flowed, almost as if they were breathing. Inside, the air felt calm and clean, and Ethan noticed a faint warmth that seemed to soothe every worry and fear. Lyra guided Ethan further into the sanctuary. She explained that this place belonged to her people, a hidden refuge on Earth that only a few knew about. The chamber contained healing pods, tools, and objects that Ethan could not begin to understand. He watched as Lyra stepped into one of the pods, and a soft blue light surrounded her. She closed her eyes, and he could see the faint glow of energy flowing around her body. "This will restore my strength," she said, though Ethan could feel her thoughts without words. He waited patiently, sitting beside the pod, feeling both awe and responsibility. While Lyra healed, Ethan explored the sanctuary carefully. He noticed symbols etched into the walls and floors, images of her world and scenes of her people. One image showed the skies of Altheria filled with floating cities, rivers of light, and creatures that glided effortlessly above the ground. Another depicted battles, with armies moving swiftly and powerful machines in motion. Ethan realized the depth of responsibility Lyra carried. She was not only a princess, but also a symbol of hope for her people. Protecting her was no longer just about saving a single life. It was about preserving the future of an entire civilization. As the night passed, Lyra emerged from the pod, her energy restored. She moved with renewed strength, and her eyes shone brighter than ever. "We cannot stay long," she told Ethan. "The enemy knows where I came from. They will find us if we remain here too long." Ethan nodded, understanding the urgency. Though the sanctuary was safe for now, their journey was far from over. Together, they began preparing for what would be the first real confrontation with the forces chasing her. Lyra shared more of her knowledge with Ethan. She showed him how to sense energy patterns, how to anticipate movements, and how to create subtle barriers using her abilities. Ethan listened intently, learning quickly. He realized that his courage alone would not be enough. They needed strategy, coordination, and clever thinking. They practiced small exercises, testing their reactions and learning to move as a team. Ethan was amazed at how much he was growing, how his mind was opening to possibilities he had never imagined. The tension of the journey weighed on both of them, but it also strengthened their bond. They shared stories of their worlds. Ethan spoke of the simple beauty of Earth, the kindness he had seen in people, and his own dreams of adventure. Lyra shared memories of her home, the beauty of Altheria before it was attacked, and the love of her family and people. In those moments, they were no longer just protector and protected. They were friends, companions, united by trust, hope, and a common purpose. Suddenly, a warning ripple ran through Lyra's mind. The enemy was close, closer than they had expected. Ethan felt a surge of adrenaline. They had prepared for confrontation, but nothing could completely prepare him for the fear and intensity of the moment. Figures moved at the edge of the sanctuary's protective barrier. Shadows flickered, and the air grew tense. Ethan and Lyra exchanged a quick glance, communicating silently. They had to act, and they had to act together. The first wave of the enemy reached the entrance, trying to break through the protective energy. Lyra extended her hands, creating a shimmering shield that held them back. Ethan moved quickly, using objects from the sanctuary to set small traps and obstacles. Branches, rocks, and tools became clever barriers that slowed the enemy's advance. The confrontation was tense, and Ethan could feel his heart pounding. He realized that every choice mattered. A single mistake could put both of them in danger. Tut! Enemy pushed harder, but Lyra's shield held firm. Ethan noticed a pattern in their movement and whispered it to Lyra through their connection. Together, they anticipated the next steps, blocking paths and creating confusion. The enemy began to hesitate, frustrated by their inability to reach Lyra. Ethan felt a surge of pride. They were not just surviving, they were outsmarting their pursuers. Every moment of training and preparation, every act of trust and teamwork was paying off. After what felt like hours, the enemy withdrew temporarily, regrouping at the edge of the forest. Ethan and Lyra took a moment to catch their breath, their hearts still racing. They knew this was only the beginning. The sanctuary had provided temporary safety, but the battle was far from over. They needed a long-term plan, a way to ensure Lyra's survival and the chance to return to her people. Ethan looked at Lyra, determination in his eyes. "We can do this," he said. She nodded, her own courage shining brightly. "Together," she replied, and he could feel the strength in her words. By the time the sun rose, Ethan and Lyra were ready to continue. They left the sanctuary, moving carefully through the forest with renewed focus. The confrontation had shown them their own strength and the importance of trust, strategy, and courage. They knew the path ahead would be dangerous, but they also knew that every step brought them closer to hope. The bond between them had grown unbreakable, and together they were prepared to face whatever challenges awaited. The journey to save Lyra, and perhaps an entire world, was only beginning. Ethan and Lyra moved through the forest with quiet determination. The night was calm, but both of them knew the danger was far from over. The enemy forces were relentless, and the closer they got to Lyra's people, the stronger and more organized the enemies became. Every step required careful thought. Ethan led the way, scanning the shadows, while Lyra used her energy senses to anticipate movements and hidden threats. They had grown into a team, trusting each other completely, ready to face anything that came their way. After days of traveling, they reached a rocky cliff that overlooked a valley filled with light. From afar, Ethan could see structures floating above the ground, glowing with a soft, pulsing energy. It was Lyra's world, the remnants of her people's home. The sight was breathtaking. Ethan had seen visions of Altheria before, but nothing compared to witnessing it with his own eyes. Lyra's expression softened. She whispered, "We made it. We are close." Ethan smiled, but his eyes remained sharp. The enemy might be near, and they had to be careful. As they descended toward the valley, shadows appeared behind them. The enemy had followed them, determined to capture Lyra before she could reach safety. Ethan's heart pounded, but he didn't hesitate. He guided Lyra through narrow paths, rocky tunnels, and hidden passages, using every bit of knowledge they had gained during their journey. Lyra's abilities helped them navigate energy fields and obstacles that would have been impossible for a normal human. Together, they moved swiftly, silently, and efficiently. Suddenly, the enemy confronted them. In a wide clearing, figures surrounded them, armed with advanced weapons that glowed with energy. Ethan felt a surge of fear, but he quickly replaced it with resolve. He looked at Lyra, and their connection conveyed a single thought: "We fight together." Lyra raised her hands, creating a shield of light that shimmered and expanded to protect them both. Ethan, armed with tools and traps they had prepared along the way, moved carefully, setting barriers and distractions that slowed the enemy's advance. The battle began. Lyra's shield pulsed and shifted, deflecting energy blasts and attacks. Ethan used the terrain to their advantage, pushing loose rocks and branches to create obstacles. The enemy was strong, organized, and relentless, but Ethan's quick thinking and Lyra's powers turned the tide. Every movement, every decision, mattered. They were not just surviving, they were taking control. Ethan realized that courage was not just about fighting. It was about strategy, intelligence, and believing in each other. During the confrontation, Ethan noticed the enemy leader, a tall figure with glowing armor and a commanding presence. The leader moved with precision, clearly stronger and more dangerous than the others. Ethan knew that defeating this leader was essential to escape safely. He whispered a plan to Lyra, and she nodded, understanding immediately. Using a combination of her energy powers and Ethan's clever distractions, they drew the leader into a trap. Rocks tumbled from above, branches snapped, and energy pulses disrupted the enemy's coordination. The leader was momentarily caught, off guard, giving Lyra the chance to push forward with a powerful energy wave that created a barrier between them and the enemy. With the leader temporarily subdued, Ethan and Lyra made a final dash toward the glowing structures of Altheria. The valley seemed alive with light and energy, welcoming Lyra back to her people. As they entered the city, Ethan felt an overwhelming sense of awe. The structures floated gracefully, streams of energy connected buildings, and creatures with shimmering wings moved effortlessly through the air. Lyra's people, who had been hiding and recovering, came forward, their eyes filled with hope and relief. They surrounded her, celebrating her safe return, and Ethan realized the full impact of their journey. His bravery had not only saved Lyra, but had also given hope to an entire world. Lyra turned to Ethan, her eyes shining. "You have done more than I could have imagined. You saved me, and you changed everything." Ethan smiled, feeling a mix of pride and humility. He had always dreamed of adventure, but nothing had prepared him for this. The responsibility, the danger, and the incredible bond he had formed with Lyra. He realized that one human's courage, one choice to act selflessly, could ripple across worlds and create lasting change. The people of Altheria welcomed Ethan, showing him their culture, their technology, and the beauty of their restored world. He learned about their struggles, their resilience, and the ways they had survived while waiting for the return of their princess. Lyra introduced him as a hero, not just to her people, but to herself. The honor was immense, yet Ethan remained humble, understanding that the journey had been a partnership. Without Lyra's trust, guidance, and abilities, he could not have succeeded. In the days that followed, Ethan and Lyra worked together to ensure the safety of the planet. The enemies who had pursued them regrouped, but with the united strength of Altheria and Ethan's knowledge of Earth strategies, they were able to defend their world. Ethan realized that his life had changed forever. He had come from a small town, living a quiet and simple life, and now he was part of an interstellar story that spanned worlds and species. He had learned courage, loyalty, and the power of trust. Before departing to Earth, Lyra offered Ethan a chance to stay with her people, to explore the wonders of Altheria. Ethan smiled and shook his head. "My place is back on Earth, but I will always carry your world in my heart," he said. Lyra nodded, understanding the wisdom in his choice. She promised that Altheria and Earth would remain connected, allies in times of need. The bond they had formed would last forever, a reminder that one brave choice could change the course of history. Ethan returned to Seabridge, forever changed. The quiet coastal town seemed smaller now, simpler, but he carried with him the memories of an extraordinary journey. He looked at the night sky often, knowing that among the stars, Lyra and her people thrived. He smiled, remembering how fear had turned into courage, uncertainty into strength, and trust into a bond that could overcome any obstacle. The story of Ethan and Lyra became a quiet legend, whispered among those who had witnessed fragments of it. One human had dared to protect an alien princess, and in doing so, had not only saved a life, but had reshaped the fate of a world. Ethan understood that heroism was not about power or glory. It was about the willingness to act, to protect, and to trust. He had learned that the smallest acts of bravery could create ripples across galaxies, and sometimes the most extraordinary adventures began with a single choice to do what was right. As the stars twinkled above Seabridge, Ethan stood on the cliff where it had all begun. He felt a quiet sense of peace, knowing that Lyra was safe, her world was strong, and their bond endured across space and time. In that moment, he realized that courage, compassion, and trust were more powerful than anything else in the universe. And though life on Earth would return to its quiet rhythm, Ethan's heart would always beat with the memory of an adventure that changed everything. For him, for Lyra, and for the world she came from.